Listen, we need to stay close and be careful here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Hello friends, this is my true story, so watch till end. My name is John Harrison, and before you judge what I'm about to tell you, understand this first. I buried my daughter while she was still breathing somewhere in this world. I cried over a grave that was nothing but stone and lies. And the people who held my hand while I mourned were the same ones sharpening the knife from my heart. I didn't know any of that when I walked into the cemetery that morning. The air was cold in a way that didn't belong to the season. Not the kind of cold that bites your skin, but the kind that settles inside your chest and refuses to leave. Every step I took felt delayed, as if my body had already given up but hadn't told my legs yet. Gravel crunched under my shoes, loud enough to feel disrespectful in a place built for silence. 2 months. 2 months since I stood here and watched them lower a tiny coffin into the ground. 2 months since the world decided my life should continue without meaning. I stopped in front of the gravestone. Isabella Harrison, beloved daughter, rest in peace. I dropped to my knees like gravity had finally won. My hands trembled as I touched the cold marble. It felt wrong, too smooth, too permanent. I pressed my forehead against it, and the sound that left my throat didn't feel human. It was the sound of something breaking beyond repair. How am I supposed to rest? I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of her name. If you're not here anymore. The cemetery didn't answer. It never does. I pulled a small silver bracelet from my coat pocket. The chain was thin, delicate, something I'd once been afraid she'd break while playing. I'd given it to her on her last birthday. She had smiled, so wide it felt like the sun had chosen her face as a home. I wrapped it around my fingers now, gripping it like it could anchor me to reality. You promised you'd never leave me, I said, tears spilling freely. You promised. My shoulders shook. My chest burned. Every breath felt like an act of betrayal, because I was still breathing and she wasn't supposed to be gone. The guilt came like it always did. What if I'd gone with her that weekend? What if I'd checked on the cabin myself? What kind of father lets the world take his child so easily? The fire had been called an accident. A tragedy no one could have predicted. Isabella had gone to spend the weekend at my wife Stella's cabin in the woods. Remote. Quiet. Safe, or so I believed. Stella had left her there while she handled business in the city. When the fire consumed the place, there was nothing left but ash, rubble, and fragments of a life that had barely begun. They told me they found her belongings. I didn't question it. I didn't have the strength to. Grief doesn't ask for evidence. It only demands surrender. Since that day, I survived on autopilot. On Stella's soft voice telling me it wasn't my fault. On my brother Mark's steady presence, his hand on my shoulder, his words repeating like a mantra, I'll handle the company. Just stay on your feet. I've got you, brother. I believe them. I needed to. Kneeling there, staring at my daughter's name carved in a stone, I felt something inside me finally collapse. I looked up at the gray sky, my vision blurred with tears. I'd give everything, I whispered, everything I own, every breath I have left, just to hold you one more time. That was the moment the truth was watching me. A few yards away, hidden behind the thick trunk of an old tree, my daughter was alive. I didn't know it then, but she was there, thin, trembling, her small hands gripping the bark like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Her eyes were fixed on me, wide and wet with tears she didn't dare let fall too loudly. She had escaped for minutes. Just minutes. Long enough to see if I still existed. Long enough to see me broken. From where she stood, she watched her father, once strong, once unshakable, crushed by a lie so heavy it bent his spine. Every sob that left my chest stabbed into her like punishment. No child should ever witness the destruction of their parent. And yet, she did. She took a step toward me, then stopped. Her heart was pounding so violently it hurt. Every instinct screamed for her to run into my arms, to scream my name, to shatter the nightmare with truth. But fear held her frozen in place. If they find out I escape, if they see me with him, they'll hurt him too. That fear was stronger than love in that moment. I stood up slowly, pressing the bracelet against my chest as if it could replace her heartbeat. My legs felt weak, my soul hollowed out. I whispered one last promise into the air. "I'll go on," I said, barely audible, "even if it feels like I already died with you." Behind the tree, my daughter bit her lip until she tasted blood. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She stayed hidden because survival demanded silence. When I finally turned away and walked out of the cemetery, something unseen shattered behind me. Isabella closed her eyes, letting a tear slide down her cheek without a sound. The reunion we both needed would have to wait. Love, that day, was not enough to save us. She returned to her prison before anyone could notice her absence. The place where they kept her was small, dark, and smelled of damp wood and fear. She moved quietly, her body curled inward like the walls themselves were listening. Hours earlier, she had risked everything just to remind herself the world still existed beyond captivity. Now she lay on a worn mattress, pretending to sleep. The room felt like a tomb. She squeezed her eyes shut, but sleep refused to come. Then she heard it. Voices, laughter, muffled conversation drifting from the hallway. Her heart leapt in her throat. She sat up slowly, every muscle tight with terror. Bare feet touched the cold floor as she crept toward the door, which was slightly open. A strip of yellow light spilled into the darkness. She leaned closer, holding her breath. And then she heard them. "It's been 2 months already, Mark," Stella said calmly. Too calmly. "No one suspects a thing. Everyone bought the fire." A man laughed. Low. Satisfied. "And your husband?" Mark's voice followed. "Still crying over the grave." Stella scoffed. "Let him cry. My daughter's world stopped. The inheritance is already moving where it belongs," Stella continued. "And the poison? It's working slowly. He has no idea. Every cup of tea brings him closer to death." Poison. The word echoed inside Isabella like a gunshot. Mark laughed again. "He trusts you more than anyone. That's the best part." They toasted. They laughed. They celebrated. And in that moment, my daughter learned that monsters don't hide in the dark. Sometimes they tuck you in at night. She covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Tears burned her eyes as the truth crushed her small chest. The people she had trusted, her stepmother and her uncle, were not just her kidnappers. They were planning my murder. "They're going to kill him," she thought, shaking. "And I'm the only one who knows." Fear didn't leave her, but something else arrived. A fierce, desperate courage born from love. That night, while they celebrated their victory, my daughter made a decision that would change everything. She would escape. She would find me. She would tell me the truth, even if it cost her everything. And while I slept under the illusion of safety, believing I had already lost the worst thing imaginable, death was already sitting at my table, waiting. I didn't know that the night my daughter overheard the truth was the same night my life was quietly being sentenced to death. While I slept in my mansion, wrapped in grief so heavy it dulled my instincts, poison was already becoming routine in my body. Not enough to kill me quickly, just enough to weaken me, to make doctors shrug, to make death look natural. But that night, unknown to me, Isabella's childhood ended forever. She told me later how the room felt smaller as she pressed her back against the wall, how the air itself seemed to choke her when Stella's voice drifted through the hallway, how every laugh sounded sharper than a blade, how every word carved something irreversible into her heart. At the time, I was home, sitting alone in the study, staring at nothing. The walls were too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own breathing and hate yourself for it. I remember lifting the cup of tea Stella had prepared for me earlier. Chamomile. She said it helped me sleep. "Drink it, John," she'd said softly, placing it in my hands. "You haven't rested in days." I drank it without hesitation. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. She had cried with me. She had held me when I couldn't stand. Trust is a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands. I had no idea that at that exact moment, in a dark cabin miles away, my daughter was learning that the woman who kissed her forehead at night was the same woman slowly poisoning her father. Isabella told me she felt frozen when she heard the word poison, like her body had forgotten how to work. Her legs wouldn't move. Her lungs barely remembered how to breathe. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But fear glued her feet to the floor, because if they found her listening, there would be no second chance. From behind that cracked door, she listened to them destroy me with laughter. She heard Mark's voice, my brother's voice, mocking my pain. The same man who had sworn to protect my company, my family, my legacy. What irony, he had said, amused. He trusts you completely. That sentence alone should have been enough to damn them both. They talked about me like I was already dead, like my existence was a minor inconvenience standing between them and wealth. They spoke about inheritance, about timing, about appearances. They spoke about my life as if it were a contract waiting to expire. And my daughter, my 2-year-old baby who should have been worrying about dolls and bedtime stories, stood there absorbing a truth too heavy for any child to carry. When she told me later, her voice didn't tremble as much as I expected. That frightened me more than tears would have. It meant something inside her had hardened. That night, she curled up on that thin mattress and pretended to sleep while her mind raced faster than her heart could handle. She knew something with terrifying clarity. If she stayed there, I would die, and no one would ever know why. She waited until the laughter stopped, until the house sank into a drunken, careless silence, until the predators believed their prey was helpless. Then my daughter did something extraordinary. She chose action over fear. Isabella told me she waited, counting her breaths, listening to the wind scrape against the windows, memorizing every sound so she could tell the difference between silence and danger. When she was sure no one was coming, she moved. The back window creaked when she pushed it open, and for a second she froze, convinced the noise would summon them. Her heart slammed, so hard it made her dizzy. But nothing happened, so she slipped out, barefoot, hungry, exhausted, terrified. She hit the cold ground and didn't cry. She bit her lip until pain drowned out fear. She ran without direction at first, just away, away from lies, away from voices, away from the people who had stolen her life. Branches tore at her skin, stones cut her feet. The forest showed her no mercy. But she didn't stop, because love can turn a child into something unstoppable. She ran with one thought repeating in her mind like a prayer and a command. I have to reach my dad. I have to save him. Hours passed. Nights stretched endlessly. Hunger clawed at her stomach. Her legs shook. Her vision blurred. But the idea of me, alive, unaware, still drinking poison, kept her moving. By the time the sky began to lighten, she had reached the city. When she finally stood before the gates of my mansion, she barely recognized it. The place looked like a fortress. Cold, closed, guarded. She gathered the last of her strength and knocked. Softly at first, then harder. "Dad," she whispered, not even realizing she'd said it out loud. I remember the sound. I was in the hallway when I heard the knock. I remember feeling irritated, annoyed even, because grief had made me allergic to interruption. I almost told the staff to handle it, but something made me walk to the door myself. I opened it, and the world stopped. There she was, dirty, thin, shaking, alive. For a second, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Reality bent in on itself. My knees nearly gave out. Isabella. The word barely escaped my mouth. She didn't wait. She ran into my arms with a force that knocked the breath out of me. And suddenly, everything I'd buried inside me tore free. I cried like a man reborn. Loud, uncontrolled. I held her like she could disappear again if I loosened my grip. "My God." I kept repeating. "My God, it's you." She cried into my chest, her small hands clutching my shirt, as if anchoring herself to existence. For a few minutes, nothing else mattered. Then she lifted her face, and everything changed. "Dad," she said, her voice urgent despite the tears. "You didn't lose me in the fire. It was planned. Stella and Uncle Mark did it." The words hit me like a car crash. I wanted to deny them. Needed to. My mind searched desperately for logic, for another explanation. "That's not possible," I said weakly. "They loved you." She shook her head. Hard. "I heard them," she said. "They laughed about it. They said everyone believed the fire." My stomach twisted. Then she said the sentence that almost killed me on the spot. "Dad, Stella is poisoning you." The room spun. She told me everything. Every word she overheard. Every laugh. Every toast. Every plan. I felt something snap inside my chest. Not break, snap. Grief turned to rage, so fast it scared me. I roared, a sound I didn't recognize coming from my own throat. Years of trust, loyalty, and blood shattered in one breath. They'll pay, I said, my voice low and shaking. Every tear, every night, every breath you suffered. I wanted to storm out, to confront them, to end it immediately. But Isabella stopped me. Dad, she said, gripping my hands. They're dangerous. If they know I escaped, they'll kill us both. She was right. And that was the moment I stopped being just a grieving father. That was the moment I became something else. I knelt in front of her and looked her in the eyes. If we want to survive, I said quietly, we have to let them think they're winning. I told her the plan. I would pretend to die. Publicly. Convincingly. I would let them celebrate. Let them take the inheritance. Let them expose their arrogance. And when they least expected it, I would return from the dead. Isabella listened without blinking. Fear flickered across her face, but so did resolve. And me? She asked. You go back, I said, my heart tearing as I said it. 1 more week. Then you escape again. We meet at the Iron Bridge in Central Park, exactly where the plaque is cracked. She nodded. A pact was formed that day. Father and daughter, bound not just by blood, but by truth. And from that moment on, my death became a weapon. The moment Isabella went back into that place, something inside me went cold. Not numb, not empty. Cold. Because numbness fades. Cold sharpens. I watched her leave my house, knowing I was sending my own child back into the arms of the people who had already stolen 2 months of her life. Every instinct in my body screamed against it. Every cell demanded I lock the doors, call the police, burn the world down if I had to. But rage without strategy would have killed us both. So I swallowed it. I stood at the window long after she disappeared down the driveway, my reflection staring back at me like a stranger. The man in the glass was older than I remembered. Thinner. Hollowed out. Grief had carved lines into my face that no amount of money could erase. Perfect. That's when I understood something terrifying. I already looked like a dying man. And if I was going to survive this, I had to become one. From that moment on, every breath I took was an act. Every movement, every pause, every silence had to convince the world I was unraveling. Not dramatically, not suddenly, slowly, believably. The kind of death no one questions. I canceled meetings first, then lunches, then calls. I let rumors spread. I didn't correct them. When my business partners asked if I was okay, I gave them half smiles and vague answers. Just tired. Doctors want me to rest. It's been hard since Isabella. Grief was my shield. People don't question a man who has buried his child. They lower their voices. They look away. They accept weakness as natural. Stella played her part beautifully. She hovered. She worried. She brought me tea with careful tenderness. She touched my arm like she was afraid I'd break. And I watched her. I watched her eyes instead of her face. Because liars rehearse expressions, but they forget their eyes. There was no concern there. Only calculation. Every time she handed me a cup, my stomach twisted. I could smell the herbs. Chamomile. Mint. Lemon balm. The same comforting scents she'd always used. Familiar. Harmless. I never drank a drop. I pretended to. I learned how to tilt the cup just enough so she'd hear liquid touch porcelain. Learned how to swallow without swallowing. Learned how to fake the slow, shallow breathing of a man fading. I poured the tea down the sink when she wasn't looking, or into the plants. I wonder how many of them died quietly with me. Mark visited often. My brother. My blood. He sat across from me in the study, legs crossed, voice steady. He talked about the company, about shareholders, about honoring my legacy. Legacy. The word made my jaw clench. He told me not to worry. Told me he'd handle everything. Told me I needed to rest and trust him. I smiled weakly and nodded. Inside, I memorized every word, every pause, every glance exchanged between him and Stella. They thought they were shepherding a broken man toward his grave. They had no idea I was already digging theirs. The first article came out 3 weeks after Isabella returned to captivity. John Harrison faces serious health decline after family tragedy. I didn't deny it. I let the story grow teeth. Doctors were bribed. Records altered. Tests exaggerated. I made sure nothing was outright false, just vague enough to leave room for speculation. Fatigue. Heart irregularities. Stress-induced complications. The kind of diagnosis that ends with condolences. At night, alone in my room, the mask came off. That's when fear crept in. Because every night Isabella was still out there. Every hour that passed without hearing her voice felt like drowning slowly. I slept in short, broken stretches. Every sound made my heart race. Every unknown number on my phone made my blood run cold. But I didn't call her. We agreed on no contact. Because one mistake would end everything. I focused on preparation. Evidence didn't fall from the sky. It had to be hunted. I hired a private investigator under a false name. Quiet. Thorough. No questions. He started digging into the cabin, the fire reports, the financial trails. Cameras hidden where Stella and Mark believed themselves safe. I wanted their confidence on record. Their laughter. Their arrogance. Their confession. The poison was traced too. Not just one substance, several. Microdoses. Designed to weaken, not kill quickly. The kind of plan you only come up with if you've had time to think. Time to rehearse murder. That knowledge haunted me. It meant betrayal wasn't impulsive. It was patient. By the 5th week, I barely left my room. I walked slower, dragged my feet, coughed in public, let my hands shake when I signed documents. Mark suggested I step down temporarily. Stella cried when I agreed. The performance was flawless. And then came the announcement. They told the press my heart had failed. A sudden cardiac arrest. Stress-related. Unavoidable. I didn't attend my own death. I watched it from a distance. Hidden in a safe house miles away, I sat in front of a muted television as my face filled the screen. My name scrolled across the bottom in white letters. Billionaire, John Harrison dead at 42. The world reacted exactly how we predicted. Shock. Sympathy. Praise. Colleagues spoke of my brilliance. Friends of my generosity. Analysts debated my legacy like I was a completed chapter. I watched Stella collapse dramatically at the podium, black veil trembling as she sobbed into waiting microphones. I lost the love of my life, she said. I nearly broke the screen. Mark's speech was quieter, more restrained. He spoke of brotherhood, of responsibility, of moving forward. People applauded. They believed every word. The funeral was broadcast live. I didn't watch it all. I couldn't. Seeing my coffin lowered into the ground, seeing my name carved into stone beside my daughter's, felt like suffocating underwater. But pain was the price of patience, and I paid it. Behind the scenes, Stella and Mark celebrated. The cameras I planted captured it all. Wine poured. Laughter echoed. Toasts were made to freedom and new beginnings. They mocked me, mocked my grief, mocked my trust, mocked the man I had been. They spoke openly now, carelessly, like victors who believe the war is over. That arrogance was their undoing. Meanwhile, Isabella waited. 1 week. That was the promise. I replayed the image of her running through the forest in my mind every day. Her bare feet, her shaking legs, her courage. I told myself if she could endure that, I can endure this. On the 7th night after my funeral, my phone buzzed. One word. Ready. My chest tightened. The next day, I drove to Central Park in a borrowed car, wearing a cap pulled low over my face. The city moved around me, unaware that a dead man was walking among them. I stood by the old iron bridge, staring at the cracked plaque we'd chosen as a marker. Every second stretched. Then I saw her. Isabella emerged from the trees, thinner than before, but standing tall. Her eyes locked onto mine, and something inside me finally loosened. She ran. I caught her mid-stride, pulling her into my arms so tightly I thought I might break her. She didn't suspect, she whispered. They think everything is over. I closed my eyes. It wasn't. The final act was ready. All that remained was timing, and the right audience. Because justice isn't just about truth. It's about making sure the world hears it. When the day of the inheritance hearing arrived, I had already died twice. Once in the eyes of the world, Once inside myself, what was left standing outside that courthouse was not the man Stella married, nor the brother Mark betrayed. It was something colder, sharper, a man who had learned that truth means nothing unless it's revealed at the exact moment lies feel safest. I stood across the street, hidden behind dark glass, watching them arrive. They looked flawless. Mark stepped out of the car first, straight-backed, confident, already wearing the posture of ownership. Stella followed, dressed in black silk that hugged her grief like a costume. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red, perfectly calibrated sorrow. Cameras loved her. They always had. I felt Isabella's small hand tighten around mine. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her heartbeat was fast. I could feel it through her fingers. Not fear, anticipation. The kind that comes when a long night is about to end. They think it's over, she whispered. I nodded. That's why it begins now. Inside the courthouse, everything smelled like polish and power. Lawyers murmured in controlled tones. Executives filled the seats, faces solemn, voices low. Journalists lined the walls like predators waiting for blood. They all believed they were attending the final page of a tragedy. No one expects resurrection. Stella sat at the front, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, leaning slightly toward Mark like a widow still learning how to stand alone. Mark rested a hand on hers, supportive, subtle, rehearsed. I watched from the back in trance, unseen. The judge entered. The room rose. The ceremony began. Document after document was placed on the table. Pages shuffled. Pens clicked. Each signature was another layer of theft being sealed under the protection of law. I felt Isabella shift beside me. Dad, she murmured. Now. Not yet, I said quietly. Let them taste it. Let them believe. Stella signed first. Her handwriting elegant, steady, no tremor. She smiled faintly when she finished, as if already imagining the doors opening for her. Mark followed. His jaw tightened as he wrote my name into history, like a conquered territory. When the judge cleared his throat and prepared to announce the transfer, I stepped forward. The doors slammed open. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Every head in the room snapped toward us. For half a second, no one breathed. Then chaos erupted. Gasps, shouts, chairs scraping back, cameras flashing so violently the air seemed to strobe. I walked in with my daughter at my side. Alive, real, unburied. Stella screamed. It wasn't a controlled sound. It wasn't theatrical. It was raw terror tearing its way out of her throat. Her face drained of color, so fast it looked unreal. Mark stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Sweat beaded instantly on his forehead. It's not possible, Stella stammered. This is a trick. I stepped closer. Every step felt like reclaiming a stolen breath. It's very possible, I said into the microphone I took from the stunned clerk. Because lies collapse when they're exposed to light. The room vibrated with murmurs. I raised my hand. Silence followed. For 2 months, I said, my voice steady despite the fire burning in my chest. You mourned me. You pitied my wife. You trusted my brother. And all that time, my daughter was alive. Kidnapped. Hidden. Silenced. Stella shook her head violently. No. He's lying. He's sick. She poisoned me. I said calmly, slowly, patiently, with the same hand she used to comfort me. The word poison rippled through the room like an electric current. Mark found his voice then. This is insanity. There's no proof. I smiled. Isabella stepped forward. My daughter, who had survived fire, captivity, and betrayal, stood straighter than anyone in that room. I heard them, she said. Her voice was soft, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. They laughed about the fire. They said everyone believed it. They said my dad was next. Somewhere behind us, someone sobbed. Screens lit up across the room. Video footage. Audio recordings. Financial trails. Their voices. Their laughter. Their confession. Stella collapsed in her chair, hands shaking uncontrollably. Mark backed away as if the evidence itself might touch him. Police moved in. Restraints clicked closed. The courtroom that had applauded them minutes earlier now stared with disgust. I looked at them both, at the people who had once shared my table, my home, my trust. You didn't just try to kill me, I said quietly. You tried to erase my daughter, and that's something even death won't forgive. They were dragged away screaming. The cameras followed, but I didn't. I turned away, because the spectacle was over. What mattered had already happened. Outside, the noise faded into something distant. Isabella leaned against me, exhausted. For the first time in months, she slept in the car ride home. At the mansion, silence greeted us, but it was different now. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. I opened Isabella's bedroom door and felt my throat tighten. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. Time had paused out of respect. She touched her dolls like they were miracles, climbed into her bed like it was sacred ground. I'm home, she whispered. I sat beside her until she fell asleep, listening to the sound I thought I'd lost forever. Breathing. That night, the phone rang endlessly. I didn't answer. Some victories are meant to be lived, not explained. The next morning, we went back to the cemetery. The same place where I had once knelt, broken beyond recognition. We stood in front of the gravestone together. Isabella Harrison, rest in peace. I placed my hands on the stone and pushed. It fell. The sound echoed across the cemetery, loud and final. Isabella stared, then smiled through tears. I wasn't born to be buried, she said. I was born to live. I pulled her into my arms. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you do. We walked away hand in hand, leaving the broken stone behind. Some stories don't end at the grave. Some begin when the truth finally stands up and walks back into the world. And this was ours.